Chairman Rickard, you can start the meeting if you'd like to.
Okay, the public hearing by the Downers Grove Planning and Zoning Commission will now be called to order at 7 p.m. on April 27th, 26. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
All right, Frankovic.
Here.
Patel.
Here.
Saw. Absent. Lincoln. Absent. Everhart.
Here.
Rays.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Barry.
Here.
Chairman Rickard.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick 3 announcements we typically do in front of every meeting. If you have a electronic device of some type, if you could just make sure that it's silenced for the duration of the meeting, that would be appreciated. Handouts, I think there are some on the counter on the side of the room, or there's a QR code you can scan, or you can, to get the agenda items, or you can simply watch the monitors up here in the room. There's also a sign-in sheet for the public. If you, in order to be recorded in the minutes, there is a sign-in sheet for attendance. If you could please make it a point to sign that before you leave, that would be appreciated. And with that, first item on the agenda is approval, the minutes from the April 6th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
A motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Wolf.
Nope. Frankovic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I turned and looked and I saw you looking up. Okay, motion by Frankovic. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Reyes. Any comments on the minutes? Any corrections?
No.
No. Okay, all in favor to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstain?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay, so Everhart abstains. With that, the minutes are approved. Okay, we have just one item on the agenda tonight, and that is the Attainable Housing Study Introduction. It's not necessarily a typical public hearing that we have. Who are we going to turn this over to?
That's correct. Public meeting. Flora Leone, our senior planner, is the project manager for this attainable housing study on behalf of the village. And so she's going to do a short introduction and introduce our consultant team that we have this evening.
Okay,
Great.
I guess we're going to go right to you.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Flora. I'm the senior planner with the village. As you know, as part of the 2025-2027 long range plan, conducting an attainable housing study is listed as a priority action item. As such, the village council did identify you all, the Planning and Zoning Commission, as the advisory group for the village's attainable housing study. The Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus has been engaged to complete the study as part of their Homes for a Changing Region program, and they will be providing a presentation overview for you all tonight. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to their team so that they can go ahead and introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Flora. Everyone hear me okay?
Mike's not on.
I don't think it's on.
We just have to adjust the volume, I think.
It's very faint.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm almost there. Got a couple more buttons to press here. You want to try it now?
Oh,
there we go.
Nice. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Flora, and thank you, Chair Rickard, for the introduction and the time. So much time that we have on the agenda this evening. My name is Ben Schnelly. I'm the manager of housing and community development initiatives for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I'm here with my colleague Nancy and Robin and Colin with Brick Partners, which is another firm that we work with on the Homes for a Changing Region. And this evening's meeting is the kickoff meeting for this housing study process. It is part presentation, but we hope that it's mostly discussion. So we hope that we're hearing from you as much as you're hearing from us. On the agenda today, we'll walk through about 20 slides of data. Not all of them will be 10-minute discussions each, because we know that time is we want to be efficient with time, but there are plenty of slides that we want your feedback on because, as we say, data is very important, but it only goes so far in understanding a community. And that's what we're relying on you for today. So we will walk through what the study process looks like here with just a 5-minute background. But even before that, I want to turn over to our team to introduce themselves. And then if you're willing, introduce yourselves to us as well. So I'll have Nancy introduce herself and we can go Robin, Colin, and go around counterclockwise if that works for you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, good evening, everyone. I'm going to stand because I can't see Catherine back there. I guess I'm too short. And anyway, I'm Nancy Furfer. I'm a senior advisor with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I come to the Mayor's Caucus kind of in a different way than most people would expect. I was the village president of Glenview for 8 years a while ago when they closed the Glenview Naval Air Station, and I had the opportunity to actually get to redevelop it after it was closed. And as I was doing the redevelopment, I realized, and I think we all realize, that planning is about people. It's for people. And the buildings are who the people serve or work for. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Homes for a Changing Region, which is the project that we bring to you. It's slightly different versions in different places, but basically it's the same one we do. It's based on people, based on demographics. Who's in your community? What are their needs? And then what kind of housing do they need? Do they want? What about for the future generations that are coming? Because housing is here for a long time, as we all know. So you want to make sure you're building for what you need. So that's it's kind of how our Homes for Changing Region project works. When I left office, I worked for a couple nonprofits, and that's where this Homes for Changing Region started. But we always partnered with the Mayor's Caucus because mayors are key. You can't do planning without the mayors, obviously, who control and look after their communities as they should. I've worked in 70 communities around the region in the last few years doing this project, and it's really great to see how different each community is and how great each community is. They're all different. And you want to keep it that way. You built it the way you want it, and you want to make sure it stays that way. And we did a tour around Downers Grove. I've been here before, but we actually drove around for an hour or two, and you have a great community. It's really, so I'm excited to work here. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Robin.
But Nancy, I have to pass the mic back because you told them that you were part of the shutting down of the Naval Air Force Base, but you didn't tell them what you redeveloped in its place. And now they should know.
Well, you may be familiar or not. If you've been to Glenview, you've heard about it. It's the Glen, which is that development that took over the 1,000 acres that are right in the middle of Glenview. What's nice about it now, if you went there, it looks like the rest of Glenview, but it's got a few nice amenities included as well, but it just blends into the community, and that's what we were working for. But it's worked. 1,000 acres. It's nice to be able to do that and be the planner, so it's kind of fun.
Seemed the important part of the story. My name is Robin Snyderman, and I'm not just president of Nancy's fan club. I'm with a firm called Brick Partners that's been around about 13 years, following a 15-year career at the Metropolitan Planning Council, where I headed up their housing and community development shop. And ever since moving back to the Chicago region in 1998, I've been very focused on the suburban growth and population and jobs and the reduction in housing affordable to that growing workforce. Home ownership was often out of reach to the entry-level workers, and the rental stock actually shrunk during that same period. So throughout my career here in Chicago, that's really what we've been focusing on in different ways, through employer engagement, through regional solutions, and supporting local leaders and innovators is core to our business model. And the Mayor's Caucus in particular has been really a pleasure to work with. So thank you for having us. I echo Nancy's comments about Downers Grove as well. It's a really beautiful community.
Hi, everyone. Good to meet you all here tonight. My name's Colin Goss. I'm with Brick Partners. I've been working for them for about a year now. Have helped on this project that whole time in 4 communities now, most recently neighboring in Elmhurst over here in DuPage. I'll also mention that I grew up in Hinsdale, very close. So I'm familiar with Downers and super excited to be helping on this project here.
Well, hello, I'm Enrique Reyes. I'm part of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't know what else I should say. I have a background in marketing and business. Good forward to here.
Hi, I'm Ed Berry. Been on the commission now 4 or 5 months, somewhere thereabouts. However, I'm a 38-year resident of Downers Grove. So I'm really, and I've read a few of the studies that you did on some towns. Amazingly enough, the town I grew up in, University Park, was one of your studies. So I'm really curious to see what's going to come out of your study here in Downers.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Eberhardt, licensed architect. I've lived in moved to Downers Grove 2005, and the main reason I did so was because it had an express train to downtown Chicago, and I loved the community and the nice little downtown that it has. And I love the difference between being in the downtown liveliness and then coming to this community where it's very comfortable and engaging and warm. I live by Downers Grove South High School. I've been on the serving planning and zoning commissions here at Downers Grove. I think this is my 9th year.
Nice meeting you. My name is Cal Patel, and I've been living in Downers Grove for about 14 years and part of the Planning and Zoning Commission for about 7 or 8 years. And just like she said, I moved to Downers Grove because I needed an express train when I was working downtown, and didn't know much about Downers Grove, but quickly my family and I fell in love with it. So I look forward to this conversation.
Hi, my name's Don Rickard. I'm also an architect. I'm about a 13-year resident, and I've been a part of the Planning and Zoning Commission here for 13 years.
I'm Catherine Frankovic. I've been a Downers Grove resident for 18 years and also a real estate professional at that time, mostly working in advertising and marketing. And I love Downers just because of the great hometown feel that it has. Been on the Planning and Zoning Commission for about 3 years.
And hi, my name's Kira. I've been in Downers for about 8 years with my family of 5. We live up the street.
We met Flora and Jason before, so we can skip those introductions if that's okay with you.
Of course.
It's fine.
And keep going here. So as Nancy described, the Homes for a Changing Region program has worked with over 65 suburban municipalities since it was started in 2005. Its mission is to help municipalities understand strategies to achieve a balanced and healthy housing stock. And that term balanced is really according to what Nancy was describing. Who's in your community? What are their current housing needs? And what are their future housing needs? If there are any mismatches, what are options available to you as a municipality that have worked well in other municipalities like yours and enhance the municipality? The program is provided by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus along with BRIC Partners. I should say a little bit more about the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus if you're not already familiar. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization that represents and serves municipalities across the Chicago region. So 275 municipalities, 7 counties. Can think of it sort of like a chamber of commerce works to help out its member businesses. We help out our member municipalities through advocacy for municipalities, as well as by providing grants and technical assistance. One of these programs being the Homes for a Changing Region program. So our process here in Downers Grove is really guided by 2 questions. The first is, what are the top housing issues or goals as the community sees it? And then what are some strategies that you as a community can work to address those issues or work towards those goals that have been effective in communities like yours? So to answer the first question about issues and goals, we're using this kickoff meeting for you to help us understand what the issues and goals are in your minds. We're having a similar conversation with focus groups in May, where we'll be engaging a broad spectrum of stakeholders in the community, ranging from large employers to smaller employers in the downtown, including school districts and civic organizations as well. We are also running a community survey for about 8 weeks. It's going to go live here in the next week or so. And that will be available for anyone who lives in Downers Grove or works in Downers Grove or both. And that survey is especially helpful for understanding people's personal experience with housing. So how well does their housing meet their current needs? Does it meet their future needs? If not, why? As well as their perspective of broader housing goals or needs in the community as well. So that will be promoted broadly through village channels, and we will be promoting it to different parts of the community, school districts, apartment buildings, etc. After those 3 steps, we'll have a sense of what the top issues or goals are to focus on in the expert panel meeting. That's a meeting where we step back and we let you hear directly from individuals who have implemented different housing policies or strategies in their community. And they describe what they did, how it worked, and what their lessons learned were. And that's an opportunity for you to ask them questions like, if you could do this again, is there anything you would do differently? Your community is in some ways different than ours in Downers Grove. How could we go about tailoring something rather than just replicating it? So that expert panel is very helpful for us to see not just strategies that are recommended in a report, but strategies that have some level of familiarity and comfort and tailored nature to Downers Grove. And in the end, the final report is about 20 or 30 pages. We try to write it in a way that it's digestible and clear for people who spend their 9 to 5 thinking about housing, as well as those who do not spend their 9 to 5 thinking about housing. And we're aiming for that final report to be presented to the Village Council at the 3rd week of August is the goal. So the next time that we would be seeing you is during the expert panel meeting. Any questions about the process?
Could you be sharing with us results of the community survey or folks who said until the final report, or is it in the expert panel meeting?
We'll be sharing a summary in the expert panel meeting.
A question about the community survey. How exactly are you reaching the people? And the reason I asked this, recently we've been taking a few initiatives like the Fairview Focus Group, and then I did listen to the local websites and the Facebook groups in Downers Grove. Everybody's saying they didn't hear about it. Now, we did everything possible to reach the people, but somebody's going to claim it's something that could stir passions if you're talking about affordable housing units, things of that nature. So how are we going about making sure that the people that we are engaging have
That's a great question. I'll allow village staff to chime in here too, but they've been excellent to work with, very proactive in thinking about that very question. So social media is one, newsletter is another, and something that we found is just individual one-on-one engagement with school districts. And for example, a lot of the groups that will be engaging during the focus groups, those are groups that can then promote it within their circles as well. Is there anything I missed?
No, I think that was great. The other idea that we were discussing as a team is also continuing to work with the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation to make sure that, you know, the survey is pushed out, as well as with downtown management, so that folks have that link to be able to complete the survey.
Yeah, we're going to cover electronic, which honestly is the easiest way to get the word out, but we're not going to forget those that might not have that easy access. So we'll go into the newsletter is a paper formats that will get delivered on May 10th. So we'll lead individuals to the website where they can take the survey. We'll also make sure that people know if they read that in the newsletter that they can come get a paper copy here so we get catalog too.
Thank you. Any other questions about the process?
I don't see any.
All right. Well, we can go ahead and dive in here. Like I said, our goal for the day is about half of this or less being data that's presented to you, and then at least half of this or more being a discussion where you're teaching us about Downers Grove.
Feel free to ask questions and interrupt. you know, while I was going through the data, because the data is just data. But you know what the data means, or if it's accurate, how you see it. Because it's more important how you see the data than just the pure numbers.
So to start us out, we'll be looking at some of the most high level, but relevant trends in Downers Grove. And as Nancy said in the beginning, this is a lot more about people than it is just about buildings and building types here, for tonight's presentation at least. So the first trend that we're looking at is that the trend of aging, and that Downers Grove has many more older adults and senior residents than in past decades. This is, of course, not unique to Downers Grove. This is a regional, national, global trend, but it's somewhere we want to start and just spark a discussion and hear from you about this. So since 2000, Downers Grove has gained over 3,000 residents who are age 65 or older, and has also seen a decline in younger age groups. So this chart on the screen shows the population in Downers Grove in 2000, 2010, and 2020, broken down by different age groups. The light blue and the navy on the right side of the screen represent those 65 and older in the community. And I'll draw our attention also to the red and the purple in the middle of the chart. That group age 35 to 54 went down by about 3,600 residents. So here we just want to hear from you if this is something that is top of mind. I know that you were likely engaged in this in the comprehensive plan. And we just want to ask if this is something that you're hearing about from residents and what you can tell us in terms of how well the senior population's housing needs are met. If you're hearing if there's certain types of housing that are in demand among the growing senior population.
So, so you have the Downers Grove Comprehensive Plan. And I think that's a really good place to start. I know that when we were going through that, there were a lot of disparities about, you know, the average household income versus the average house costs. And, you know, very wide gap there. And a lot of residents concerned about the fact that when they moved in here, they could afford it, but now their kids can't afford it. And, you know, they don't know where their kids are going to live and they just keep moving west or, you know, whatever. But I guess that's the main concern that at least I remember seeing and hearing a lot about, is that there's a lack of entry housing.
Yeah, another comment I've heard come up a few times during meetings over recent years is that the older population, when they do want to downsize, their kids are gone and, you know, their house is appreciated in value quite a bit, but they have a hard time if they want to stay in town but just downsize, having a hard time finding smaller scale housing that they like at a reasonable price. I think oftentimes they end up rolling all the money from their large house, even to pick up a small one, but there seems to be a shortage of, you know, smaller homes for people that have been here for a while and are on the top end of this age bracket that do want to stay and downsize. There seems to be a lack of that.
Yeah, if you see also the lack of, or the dropping kids under 20, that's kind of endemic of the fact that young families, there's barrier to entry price wise. And that's one of the feedback I've heard is, yeah, it's great. We all love it living here. And the children of my friends, they'll say they love to move dollars. They can't afford it. It's the basic feedback.
I would agree with that as well. I see a lot of people needing transitional housing, either they're downsizing or, you know, first home opportunities. And there really isn't any specific senior community for people to transition to if they don't want to move into another full-size home. So there should probably be some options available for that. But I would be curious too, as far as data goes, if you could find out exactly how many of the younger people who have moved back to Downers Grove, you know, what that number might be. Because I know there's probably more than more than a fair share of people who were born here and raised here who would like to move back that haven't been able to.
Yeah, great input. And I imagine that could be something we hear about in the community survey.
Mhm.
And that I should also mention the community survey has open-ended questions, open-ended prompts for people to fill in comments like that. On the topic of senior housing needs, we'll be looking at that from a few different angles. So this definitely isn't the only chance to talk about that topic. I'll move us to a different slide, but it's somewhat related here. And it's looking at the types of households in Downers Grove, broken down into really three categories. One is households with children. The second being households without children, which is really just any two-person household. It could be a couple who does not have kids. It could be empty nesters whose kids have moved out. And then the third group is single-person households. And over the past decade or so, Downers Grove has seen a shift in adding more couples without kids and more single-person households. Some of that is looking at the trend that we saw in aging, just from a different direction. And some of that is different, beyond just the trend of aging. So over the past decade, Downers Grove gained about 1,000 households without children and gained another 1,000 single-person households, and saw a slight decrease in families with kids. So we wanted to pause here and see if this is something that surprises you, if it's top of mind, if you have any questions about this type of data. Again, these are just preliminary sort of introductory slides about the biggest trends in Downers Grove that help frame the discussion for later on. But we wanted to see if this is something that you're already seeing and hearing about from your neighbors.
I'm curious about this trend as well, if it's similar to the previous page. Is this what you're seeing across other communities, or is this special to?
Yeah, this is a county and region-wide trend.
As you go through, I'd be curious to hear if there's anything you notice that seems extra, there's a deviation from the median, if you will, or Downers Grove specifically. So that would help inform some of the thinking.
We'll definitely note that as we go. There's 3 or 4. So thank you.
I definitely think it speaks to the fact that people in the older age bracket, pre-70s, tend to have more money to invest into property, whereas, younger generations don't appear to have that kind of money or savings, and the price points for these homes are kind of unattainable for them. So I think that's kind of what this speaks to more than that, because obviously when you have children, you spend a lot more money on those children. So I think you can afford more in a household, without having children. And I think that's a big part of this.
Anybody else want to add to that?
No, this doesn't surprise me at all. Like it speaks to what the prior slide where households with children, and you can see it, just, right down the streets, the block I live on used to have tons of kids. Now there's none. So this definitely, there seems to be a dearth of young families. So I don't know how that will impact schools going down the road and things of that nature.
Do you think though, this is like a cyclical thing? Because the same thing happens in my block. Like we have people who've been there many years and they're like, well, back when I was having children, all the houses were having children. Nowadays, it's kind of more half and half, but it's kind of like slowly getting replaced.
Sometimes the age.
Right. So I wonder if it's just a cyclical nature to it. I do agree that that's a probably trend that they're seeing everywhere. But I do wonder if there's just some cyclical nature.
I think it reinforces what we were saying is, if you have empty nesters, they can't afford to move.
Right.
And so your block is losing the kids, the schools are, getting depleted then, the demographics for the education system gets a little skewed because of that. So they, the empty nesters have nowhere to go, but they want to stay in the community and they can afford their house, but they can't afford another one.
Yeah.
In the same community.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely noticed a trend of, households without children and single individuals living together. And I'm curious to learn if that is a direct relation to the cost of housing or the type of housing available, if that is the sole reason for that trend, or if there are other reasons that, people are making these choices, to live that way. But I mean, I've seen it too. None of this surprises me either.
Yeah, to Chair Rickard's point, we may circle back to that question towards like the third or fourth section of this slide deck. I think you might be referring to more of the rental market of individuals living together. So I think we'll hopefully address your question, at least partially. And if not, please tell us by the end of the slide deck if we haven't come across some data that helps.
Sure.
Is there any data that shows any trends where you have households, let's call it like a joint family, where, the family's living there and then the parents are there, and, whether it's an accessory dwelling, but I'd be really interested to see if there's any trends, if that's moving, if that's increasing, staying the same, or decreasing.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I know that data is available. We don't have it in the slide deck, but we can look into, instances of multi-generational families, what percentage of the community would fall into that category. How does that compare to a decade or so? And we can certainly look that up. And if, the commission would like just a brief follow-up memo following this meeting where we answer some of those follow-up questions, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, secondary to that, I'd like to find out how many of those, not just, parents moving in with their kids, but, how many kids are not able to move out and are staying with their parents for longer periods of time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I know we've looked into that specific question before. At this point, the Census Bureau is not asking that question exactly, but we'll see if there's another way we could get to that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think I can move us into the last part of our introduction here. And it's just looking at housing in Downers Grove, the mix of housing types, and especially the vacancy rate or the competitiveness of housing in Downers Grove. So this slide looks at the mix of housing types in Downers Grove broken down by type of housing and also ownership. So single family homes, townhomes, small multifamily buildings, and large multifamily buildings. We'll say that in many ways, Downers Grove resembles the larger Chicago region in this slide, with two main differences. If you look at Chicago region as a whole, single family homes are about half of homes, so 50%, so slightly larger portion in Downers Grove. And then small multifamily homes across the Chicago region are about 27%, or a quarter of homes are in small multifamily buildings. Thinking of those like 3 flats, 4 flats in Chicago really, make a difference in that proportion compared to Downers Grove. So in a way, not too different than the greater Chicago region in terms of housing types. So just a bit of background on that. But again, tonight we're mostly focusing on people. One slide we want to put here in the front and gather your feedback on is just the competitiveness of housing in Downers Grove and falling vacancy rates. So on this slide, we're looking at the vacancy rate for homeowner housing in Downers Grove as well as rental housing. Homeowner housing is shown in blue. The rental vacancy rate is shown in orange. Generally, there's a rule of thumb that a healthy or stable homeowner vacancy rate is about 1% to 2%. That's looking at Federal Reserve data over the last 60 years, what we hear in focus group meetings. On the rental side, a healthy or stable rental vacancy rate is generally around 5% to 8%. Would be interested to hear from those of you with real estate backgrounds if that tracks with your experience. Using those rules of thumb, you can see that the rental vacancy rate in Downers Grove fell below the healthy or stable level in the mid-2010s and then rose and then fell again over the past few years. And of course, when the vacancy rate is lower than usual that pushes prices upwards just through competition. So we want to pause here and see if this surprises you, if this sparks any questions, or if this tracks with your understanding of the community.
I personally would agree that I think what's on here is pretty accurate from what I've seen in my experience in working in real estate. I think, the 2019, jump in the vacancy, I'm not 100% sure of what that's for, but I know that, there has definitely been a housing shortage within Downers for a while, for a couple of years at least. And in both areas, it's been difficult to find properties for rent or for sale. So
This is about I can't say there are any surprises here. This is, if I had to guess, this doesn't surprise me.
We've had a number of multifamily buildings, particularly downtown here, open recently, right? Where on the timeline do y'all?
Yeah, we have it on the next slide. Thanks to
okay.
village staff, being proactive and providing us that information. Because those two slides really go hand in hand, vacancy rates and production in recent years. Most of these multifamily buildings are rental. And so you can see a jump around 2021, a jump in 2015, and then a jump in 2025 as well. So it is somewhat surprising to us that we've seen the rental vacancy rate continue to decrease, even amid the increased production over the past decade. And we'll see in later slides what some potential causes of that are. But as a preview, it just seems like there's a lot more people who find themselves renting rather than pursuing homeownership, or maybe they're downsizing from homeownership into the rental market. And that's driving demand for rental options, not just in Downers Grove, but elsewhere as well.
Just to speak to something that might skew the market a little bit, or some of the data a little bit, is the fact that people have been renting temporarily before they can close on certain properties, or renting things back. And so there's been a little bit of blurriness as far as that's concerned. To, make it clear, could I ask staff, do you happen to know, like in 2021, what that jump would be related to? Was there a specific development that was at that time?
So that would be Maple and Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and Oak Trace, the newer building that was constructed. Thank you, Jason.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and related to that, I was considering this helping you at that time, but I know there was some discomfort in the community about a large structure like that opening. I don't recall their specific concerns, but I'd be curious if they came true. If they were. Y'all were around for that. In terms of thinking about what our goals should be, that's why I'm asking.
No, I just have a question. If we can go to the previous slide, if there's any data that shows, we've got this total inventory of rentals, but the owners, or what the profile of the owners look like for these landlords. Do they live in Downers Grove? Are they big corporations outside of Downers Grove? Is the ownership US based? Just curious for that data point. Not sure if I can lead with what I learned from that, but I think that would be interesting for at least us and perhaps the community to get some insight into if it's available.
And I would echo that, not just for when we think of the multi-unit structures, excuse me, but homes as well. How many homes are corporately owned?
Yep. Great questions, great points. There's data available about purchase of homes by corporations or LLCs through the years for Downers Grove and all communities across the Chicago region. So that's a very straightforward question to answer with data. On the question about, ownership of multifamily properties, rental properties, if there are any, challenges that have been experienced in Downers Grove related to that, that's helpful for us to hear either today or in focus groups, particularly around, maintenance and quality maintenance of rental properties. Because we know that Downers Grove does have a substantial number of rental properties in the community. So not that we need a definitive answer to that during this meeting, but if there is anything that you'd want to share, we're happy to hear it. So, having covered that background, the big trends, aging population, shift in household types, and then falling vacancy rates, even amid increased production, we really want to focus on three parts of this conversation: homeowners in Downers Grove, renters in Downers Grove, and then people who commute into Downers Grove. How well are each of these three groups' housing needs being met? And then at the end of this discussion, if there's anything that we missed, any direction that you think we should be going down that we haven't covered, there's time at the end for you to tell us that as well. So we'll start with homeowners in Downers Grove, and I believe that Commissioner Eberhardt mentioned this was maybe part of the comprehensive plan, this discussion of comparing the typical price of housing to the typical incomes in the community. This slide shows the median sale price of homes in Downers Grove through the years, paired with the median income of Downers Grove households through the years. And there's a rule of thumb in the housing world that a household can afford to buy a home that's about 3 times their annual income. There's lots of variables, credit scores, student loans, but as a way of simplifying a rule of thumb and looking at data like this, that 3-to-1 rule of thumb is something that Homes for a Changing Region has used since it was started back in 2005. And you can see back in 2012, the median household income in Downers Grove was closer to that 3-to-1 ratio, where by 2024 it was past 4-to-1. So in 2024, a household would need about $150,000 to afford the median home sale price in Downers Grove. And again, this is not a trend that's just unique to Downers Grove. It's something that we see in DuPage County, the Chicago region as a whole. So we'll go right to that before pausing and hearing from you what else we should know about this data. On this slide, we're looking at the median home sale price in Downers Grove and DuPage County, shown in orange, and then in the Chicago region, shown in red. And you can see that all three are rising at about similar rates. Really interestingly, it's about a $50,000 difference between each group, and it sort of runs.
The next slide.
Doing two at one time. Really interestingly, it runs almost parallel between these three groups. And so this is a trend that's not unique to Downers Grove, but getting into this discussion of rental versus ownership, this is a larger trend that does impact Downers Grove in some ways. So looking back in 2012, just at the Chicago region as a whole, zooming out as wide as we can here, the household earning the median income across the Chicago region, it was pretty attainable to afford the median home sale price across the whole Chicago region. About $150,000 for a home, and households were earning about $60,000 on average. So well within that 3-to-1 ratio. And then by the time you get to 2024, it's also closer to that 4-to-1 ratio across the Chicago region. So that's definitely factoring into the number of households who find themselves pursuing home ownership versus pursuing rental options. So just wanted to pause here. There's a lot to take in here, but the headlines are just home sale prices rising faster than incomes, and it's not entirely unique to Downers Grove. It sounds like this has been a discussion of the past, and just want to pause here and let you tell us if there's anything more that we should know about this trend.
I mean, I don't think it's a secret that people aren't getting wage increases that are matching the cost of things anymore. And most people are starting to experience some stress from that. I think it's a trend that's definitely been increasing nationally for at least the last 5 years, pretty significantly. So I think it's just a matter of general cost of living expenses and not enough wage increases in our system, unfortunately.
Anybody else have thoughts?
That doesn't surprise me at all, like most of the other slides.
Yeah, and it seems like, no matter the price of the housing here, there's demand for it because it goes quick. A lot of them are sold before they're even listed. And I don't know if that's still common today. I don't follow the real estate market real closely, but especially smaller houses, so they get sucked up so fast that there's obviously demand for it, but that also applies to the larger scale, more expensive homes too. There doesn't surprise me that there's not a lot of vacancy and they sell fast, so there's demand for them. And I feel like there's probably even greater demand for something that's not less quality, just smaller scale, and something that's more attainable for, young people and older people both.
Yep. Thank you. And to Chair Rickard's point, that seems to be true not just within Downers Grove, but across the Chicago region as a whole. So, looking at this chart, while the regional home sale price seemed to be lagging somewhat in 2012, it's definitely caught up. So there's a lot of that demand for the smaller, more attainably priced home, not just in Downers Grove, but in other counties, other parts of the region, that are in some ways catching up to some of the higher priced places to begin with.
Just want to say, if I could really quickly, just from my personal perspective of what I've seen, a lot of anything under 400,000, if it's listed privately or if it's, on the market, is usually taken up pretty quickly. But also, anything that's listed privately tends to go faster than things that are actually hitting the market these days. And that's kind of been the trend because of the low inventory. But definitely a lot more people are looking for those smaller houses that are less to maintain, less on taxes. Overall, that's the majority of what I see getting snatched up as quick as possible. A lot of times that doesn't even hit the market before it's gone.
Yeah, to Commissioner Frankovich's point, we'll see that data in a few slides, and that was one of the data pieces that surprised us, that stood out to us, that's a little bit different in Downers Grove than in other communities. Just the rate of home value increase in those smaller, mid-century era homes. So we'll see that here in a few slides. The next two slides we'll look at are really slides that get at the heart of the question of how well are people's housing needs being met in the community? Are there mismatches? If so, where are those mismatches? So this first slide is looking at, thank you. This first slide is looking at all homeowner households in the community, and it's looking at whether they can comfortably afford the housing that they live in or less so. It's using a term called housing cost burdened, which is a household that is spending more than 30% of their monthly income on housing. It's a rule of thumb that's been used by the Census Bureau for decades, by different realtors and lenders. And this slide also has a category of households that are severely cost burdened, who are spending more than 50% of their income on housing. So overall, about 1 in 5 homeowner households in Downers Grove are cost burdened. That's pretty similar, pretty consistent to other communities like Downers Grove. And the issue is particularly common in households that have incomes below 100,000 and especially below $50,000 a year. Those are often seniors on fixed or limited incomes. And so we'll pause here and just see if there's anything that you hear from your neighbors. We know that this is not something that, I hear or ask my neighbors about directly. It's not something you talk about at a barbecue necessarily, but this could be something that you're hearing about in your formal roles for the community. So just wanted to pause here and see if this surprises you or if there's any questions that you have about it.
Just anecdotally, certainly when I talk to older, the seniors seem to be the ones that appear to be most cost stressed as how that could be just the people I speak to. So I think they'll have an opportunity to speak to a lot of people in the departments of that, but the older homeowners will talk about being cost stressed in the different.
I mean, this graphic seems to kind of point out something that seems obvious, that the higher your income, the less burdened you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that the more broke you are, the more stressed you are.
We need to print more money.
Right? You go buy more ink.
Yeah, it is a relatively straightforward, chart or trend. And from our experience, it's something we hear about in community surveys a lot, and specifically citing property taxes or maintenance or rising home insurance costs. And it's sort of all bundled together into a situation that a lot of seniors do find themselves in. So in the report, we definitely do look to rely on community survey input as much, if not more, as this data, but it's a helpful starting point, and appreciate the input that you've provided on it. This next slide is really tied to the prior. The prior slide looks at household incomes and what they're spending, and this looks at the homeowner market and who's in the homeowner market and what homes are in the homeowner market. This is what you could call a supply and demand chart. It shows homes in orange and it shows households in blue, and it's broken down by income and affordability. So there you can see any sort of mismatches that are in the community. You can see that there are more homeowner households with incomes below $50,000 than homes that are generally affordable to them. Oftentimes that's the senior household or senior individual who has a fixed income, and their homes have appreciated to the point that their homes would be on the right side of this chart, while their incomes remain on the left side of this chart. This is a trend or a mismatch that is also very common. This is almost universal in homeowner markets, regardless of the community that you're looking in. But it does help explain the slide that we looked at previously. So I'll pause here and see if this is surprising, if you have any questions or anything you want us to know beyond what's shown here on the screen.
I've seen, builders investing more in building, the larger 4 to 5 bedroom, 3,000 plus square foot homes, way more than I've seen builders investing in smaller units or, smaller residential communities or senior communities or things of that nature, when there's definitely more of a demand for that. But the builders are more inclined to go for that higher money investment versus making the smaller homes that they would, do better on volume in that regard. So I feel like that's a trend I feel that builders have been following for at least the last 10 years. And that kind of reflects this graph. So
I think also you have to remember, unfortunately, the cost of labor
yes.
and the shortage of labor,
Mhm.
and then the cost of materials is really, inflation has done a number on that, which is making the cost of building a house, much more expensive. So it's hard to build an affordable house now.
Mhm.
when you think about the cost per square foot. So that's part of the problem as well.
A lot of people who rehab find that out as well too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, and it seems obvious on the other slides as well, that the cost of building is so much higher than the wages that people, you know, regular people make. And you know what, the only thing that I can think of in my, you know, pea brain here is, you know, how do we flip that script? It's incentives of some kind, I would guess, you know, because we've sat here and, you know, approved many PUDs for developments that are these like more expensive homes and larger homes. But they met our criteria. We didn't have a criteria. I mean, that would be another way to do it. Like, oh, well, you know, this area needs to have this percentage of affordable housing or something like that. But there's no, right now, I don't see any incentive to do that. And that's why, you know, it just keeps perpetuating itself.
Downers has a challenge too, because, you know, we're only so limited within our
Yeah,
borders
yeah.
and we don't have large parcels of land in which to be able to, you know, build a large scale community or something of that effect. So that's a challenge that we have uniquely here in Downers as well, just because of the size of our town. Yeah.
I think the cost of regulation too is a big burden on home buildings. And builders are in the business of making money. That's really their, you coming to hit me for my government comment?
I never did that before. But
You know, the builder's interest is in making money, and there seems to be a big need in smaller scale housing, but with the cost of the regulation and the cost of the land, they can't make money building the types of houses that we probably need. Not just single family homes, but other homes, you know, you know, those costs weigh heavily on the price of a smaller, simpler home, and builders just, honestly, I don't think they're much interested in them because there's not much profit in them.
Well,
I think is a problem too.
yeah, and to your point, if we're talking about single family homes, building a smaller house, you're still going to have the same or a similar outset of money to just get all the parts and pieces together, the materials, the people. And yeah, your bang for your buck isn't there. But what if it was, you know, a multifamily, you know, like 4 units or townhomes or something like that? Would that start to, you know, outweigh or start to even the playing ground?
Playing field.
Playing field, thank you. Ground field.
But I think one of the issues is, in addition to the materials costs and labor costs, we do studies when I worked in the insurance industry up until a year or so ago. It's going up about 2 to 3 times costs of regular inflation. Materials, a lot of them are imported. There's a labor shortage, but you couple that also with the inherent land value here. And so it's not, in many instances, it's not economically feasible for a builder to put a smaller thing on it, on a
Right.
standard size lot here.
That's true. Yeah, and I know that, I believe that part of the solution would be smaller lots, but as long as I've been up here, anytime the suggestion of smaller lots or higher density comes up, people come unglued. They talk about, you know, we need more affordable housing, we need more attainable housing, but when you bring up density and small scale and putting people tighter together, it's like those two ideas don't work together. And I'm curious to see as this moves forward, if more of that comes out. Any other comments or thoughts at this time?
I know with the master plan, we've looked at repurposing some areas, you know, like, like manufacturing buildings and that, but I don't know if that helps kind of balance things out or not. Probably not, because you still gotta probably tear them down or do a lot of work to make them livable.
I would think that some type of adaptive reuse like that will probably show up at some point in this process, because there's not a lot of unbuilt space where you can, start building new housing stock of a certain type for, to target where we have needs. Feel like some of it's going to come from either rezoning or adaptive reuse of buildings that are out there that are struggling or they can't keep filled. Convert them to some type of housing.
Or even my house, I look at it all the time going, could I partition this off and have my mom live here? That kind of thing.
I think definitely incentives for, villages and even the state for that matter, some of the things the governor is discussing and looking at passing right now would, I think, give people more options and be able to maybe offset some of that cost and maybe encourage people to redevelop those areas and maybe repurpose those buildings. But I think definitely some incentives would be needed.
Thank you. Great discussion. Outlined many of the challenges and barriers and, are starting to get into potential solutions. And I will say in the expert panel, we always present a range of options, to the chair's point, there are some strategies that generate more heartburn than others. And there are some strategies that are also focused on preservation of the existing affordable homeownership options that are shown on the left side of the screen. So we'll be really interested to see how this process goes, see what the input is from the survey and the focus groups that will help us put together that panel.
Since Ben just mentioned it, I have a question that as we were driving around today, we saw quite a number of apartments. I don't know if they were 6 apartments, and it was in the southern part of, southeast, and there was they were probably built, I would guess, probably in the 60s, 70s. Those apartments do you know if there are issues on maintenance inside? Like, I'm looking to preserve them to make sure that they're well managed and well kept up so that you don't lose any of those over time.
If this was the southeast part of the town, it is very likely it was on the east side of Fairview, where a majority of those properties are in Westmont. And I think that there's a couple that's in Darien too, on the border
Oh,
too,
really?
not too far from, or in the same, not in the corridor where Oak Trace, which that is in Downers. That's our independent and assisted living senior facility and community that we have down there too. But if you go up north and south, east side of Fairview, a lot of that is in Westmont and Darien. I think that's the area you're referencing.
Good
But
to know.
to her point, what about on the west side? Could there be buildings that are like close to 355?
What's the question?
I believe you were asking, not to speak for you, is that if we had maintenance issues or public perception on those types of homes on that side of town, there is on the southeast side of the town, 75th Street, down that way, that is Downers over there too. And we do have an assortment of apartments and townhomes that are likely built in the 60s and 70s.
What about like off of Prentice or even off of Warren?
Right, maybe the southwest part of town.
Yeah.
So just to clarify geography, but I think there was a question for planning and zoning on that.
But are you saying that there were some small scale apartment buildings that were a little bit aged and not properly maintained or not?
On the outside, they look fine. No, I'm not saying that they looked like they were falling apart, but in a lot of communities, you have projects like that, or, residences like that have not been well maintained as they get older. And then you worry about losing them to redevelopment, but that won't be redeveloped. That will take over and not be as affordable as the ones that you have now. So it's a matter of making sure that you want to preserve, because they're good houses. They're well built. And from the outside, you can see they're well built. But you don't know if they're not being properly maintained inside. Does that mean they'll be more likely to somebody say, well, you know what? Why don't we just rebuild these? I can take these over, and then you lose some of your good affordable housing that's already there. So.
Yeah, I have noticed over the years that there are kind of scattered throughout the single family residence neighborhoods. Occasionally you'll see a duplex in the middle of a block or on a corner maybe. And some of them are pretty well maintained, but you could tell some of them look like they're not owned by the occupant. They're not maintained as well. And I feel like that makes them stick out and look different more so than the fact that it's a duplex.
Yeah.
And if the duplex were maintained and kept in good order, it could blend in better, with the neighborhood.
And do you have anything along those lines that, as part of your findings, that kind of encourage the maintenance of these properties? I know there's a number of duplexes in town. Most of them, except for the one that was built right across the tracks, they were probably built in the 60s and 70s, where the zoning wasn't as strict as it is now. And a couple of them have been well maintained, but a couple of them, just going down the street, they stick out from the housing stock. That maybe a little better lawn maintenance or exterior maintenance, they blend in better, but there's no mandate to do that at this point. I think we need the housing, but if you have somebody absentee is not taking care of it, are we really all benefiting?
Do you do any code enforcement here for rentals?
We don't have, there's some communities like Woodridge does have an annual licensing inspection that we do not offer that. We do have a code enforcement team though. So if there is a complaint or from our officers, driving through town that it doesn't meet the property maintenance code, then we have enforcement measures for that.
Thank you. We may circle back to this conversation as we continue through the homeowner conversation and into the renter conversation, but I appreciate that because it's a common thread of preserving the existing affordable homeownership options that you have and preserving the lower cost rental options that you have in terms of quality and maintenance over time. Okay, just 2 more slides on the homeowner side of things before we look at renters and people who work in the community. This is the slide that I mentioned earlier that is in some ways unique to Downers Grove. This slide is looking at the median value of homes and built from different decades and what the typical value or the median value was in 2014 compared to 2024. And in every community, those homes built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s are usually the starter homes, smaller number of bedrooms, smaller square footage, different construction styles back then compared to more modern homes. That's certainly the case in Downers Grove as well. What surprised us in some ways is just the extent that values rose in those homes in Downers Grove. And each of those groups, the median home value rose by about $100,000 over the past decade. So that shows that the trends we saw earlier of just overall sale prices going up is not necessarily just due to new construction, but also just the really strong desirability for these starter homes and downsizing options built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So again, this was referenced in conversation already, but I'll pause here and see if there's any reactions to this. If there's anything else you think we should know about this trend.
Not a whole lot of love for the post-war housing, that's for sure. But it was just generally smaller. So these are going to be smaller square footage. As a rule, the average house that had 1 or 1.5 bathrooms, they didn't have a bathroom per bedroom or things of that nature. So this would seem to naturally flow. I mean, obviously you would have some big houses built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but for the most part, the average square footage is less. So this would be
I think it really speaks to the community though, because I think the reason the home prices have increased so much is people want to genuinely be here because of, you know, where we are located, the amenities that we have, the transportation options that we have, being close to expressways and everything and the train. I feel like that's a big draw, and especially that, like I spoke before about the hometown feel that we have here, which is really valuable. It's a little Mayberry-ish sometimes. So I think a lot of people really like that in a community. They want to raise their families here. They want to have their retirement here, you know. So I feel like that's a big contributing factor to this. Definitely needs to be addressed
And these are getting snapped up quickly.
extremely quickly.
And I had mentioned earlier about rentals, and this is one of the areas where I see potential issues that even non-resident corporations or entities are buying some of these houses that I've seen recently, and they're renting them for probably more than the mortgage would be. So that's providing a real barrier for people coming into the town, having the absentee landlord renting these houses, taking them out of the housing stock.
Yeah, and also in the sales market, you know, the competition for homes has been so fierce. I mean, people have been, you know, asked to waive inspections. They've been asked to waive, you know, all kinds of, you know, typical options that you would go through in a home buying process. You ask to offer over asking price, you know, and getting in bidding wars and things like that. I think that definitely pushes things up a lot as well. So.
Anybody else?
Yep. Thank you. And one more slide here on the homeowner side. This one is more straightforward, a little more brief. This slide is looking at the rate of residential demolitions in Downers Grove over the past 15 years or so. In total, about 670 residential demolitions occurred, about 42 residential demolitions per year. You know, what was surprising to us to some extent is that there was the largest peak or the fastest rate in 2010s, rather than some communities will see this really pick up in 2020, 2021, 2022. So this is a trend that is not necessarily caused just by pandemic or lower interest rates or people's housing demand shifting over the past 5 or so years. It was really something that was going on beforehand as well. So maybe less of a discussion here, but just something that we wanted to note as we close out this homeowner side, that it's in some ways affecting the charts and the trends that we just saw on prior slides.
Are the numbers as a percentage different from other communities, or is that average that you would see in other communities?
Well, it's different in every community. There are some communities that are like this, but there are many that don't have nearly that much either. It just, I think, depends on the community, and it's hard to say.
Would you, so you don't know, like, oh, Downers Grove has a higher rate of demolitions than other?
Seems pretty
I
high.
would say high,
That's pretty high, yeah.
just in terms of the last year in the communities we've worked in.
Okay. And is there some sort of like relation to when these homes were built, that it makes sense to have demolitions after a certain point? Or is that kind of less expected?
You know, I think that's pretty granular, and we may want to talk with village staff first before trying to answer that, because it could be any number of reasons: location, being really close to amenities, lot sizes being really favorable, or zoning regulations being very favorable. And it's just really hard to tell at this point what the exact causes would be.
And I think when especially those smaller, older houses, and a lot of times they're not maintained, they fall into disrepair, so they get targeted as a tear down. And I think as soon as the value of the land is much more than the value of the structure, it becomes tear down.
Right.
It's a math problem at that point.
And I feel like that's okay. The problem is when what goes up is completely unaffordable to most people.
Yes,
So
yes.
I think it's something to consider. I don't think there's anything wrong with a normal speed of tearing down houses and having new constructions, but are the point that they were making before, are we losing affordable housing overall? And it is part of the problem, so I think it's just being.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that. They're not putting up 1,500 square foot houses. They're putting up, 4,000 where there was a 1,200 square foot house. Yeah, because they're being bought by builders and they got to make money.
Well, I mean, I just noticed, the 2017 bubble there. And it coincides with about how long I've been doing this, the planning and zoning stuff. Because that's what really motivated me, was just driving, from train station to my home, and everything within I don't know, a mile radius of the train station.
Mm-hmm.
So many tear downs, and then the houses going up were dwarfing their neighbors. And so that, to me, that was why I got involved with this. Just, I wanted to be a part of kind of finding that balance, not, hopefully allowing that kind of disparity to be built right next door to your home.
Yeah, in some cases, the character of entire blocks has changed.
Yeah.
Because what used to be smaller scale housing, over time, they've disappeared and been replaced with houses that are 3 times the size. Next thing you know, somebody who lived on a quaint block with a lot of small, nice, quaint little homes has turned into what looks to be like a new subdivision
Yeah,
of all the same
just drive down
Style
Washington,
houses. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the costs were favorable then for that type of development. People could afford it at that point in time, and the builders could afford to build them. And so people did. They just went kind of crazy with it and started tearing everything down. And then people started to realize how much they were paying in taxes and everything else that it was costing them. And the neighbors started complaining for, runoff reasons and stuff like that. So I think people started to realize that the cost started to go up on it. People were like, well, what can we preserve versus just tearing everything out, and starting fresh. So I think that's mostly what I see this trend reflecting. It's just general affordability of that kind of building.
If I can interject, you just said the magical words. That is something that did change between 2017 and 18.
Yeah.
If some of you were up here, but not all, that is when we changed our stormwater ordinance or updated it again.
Yeah.
And the regulations changed between 2017 and 2018. So that might be the reason for the drop.
Yeah, very much so. It was a big talking point around most neighborhoods at that time.
And still.
And still hear about it all the time.
Well, thank you. I think we can go ahead and pivot to the rental side of the conversation here. Only 3 slides that we'll be looking at. Thank you. But 3 quality slides, so we can go through these maybe a little bit slower and just allow you to fill us in on what we should know besides the data. These slides are looking at the same type of data, asking the same questions as we were just looking at on the homeowner side of things, but just applied to the rental market in Downers Grove. So this slide is looking at all renter households in the community, broken down by different incomes, and asking the question, how easily can each household afford the housing that they live in? Can they afford it just fine, spending under 30% of their income? Are they stretched thin, spending 30 to 50%? Are they severely cost burdened, spending over 50% of their income on housing? Just over half of renters in Downers Grove are cost burdened to some extent, spending more than 30% of their income on housing. This is in some ways different than other communities. Many communities are around 40, 45% of renters being cost burdened. So being above that 50% mark is unique compared to the county or the broader region. And what is fairly common, though, is for the trend to be most impacting renter households with incomes below $50,000, often those service sector workers whose incomes are around $40,000, $45,000. And it's just very hard for the private market to supply rental options at that price point without any sort of subsidy. So we'll pause here and see if this is surprising to any extent, or if this is something that is already top of mind if you have any questions about this data.
I for one am a little surprised that it's that disparate between the renters in the 50 to 100,000 income versus the homeowners in the 50 to 100 income. So it just, yeah, I guess that was surprising to me that it's more than twice percentage wise.
Rents, I think, have gone up faster than mortgages, though. And I think that's a reflection in here is the fact that, you know, people have been really raising those rental prices much higher than mortgage rates have been. And most people know that it's cheaper to buy if you're able to than to rent something.
And is it related then to the supply? So there's a lack of supply for the demand too, and that makes the rentals prices go up?
I think there is, you know, something to that. I don't know exactly like what the specific numbers would be, but I do think there is definitely a shortage of affordable rentals for most people. Yeah, if they're in that market.
I'm always shocked to hear when people come up with applications to build, you know, rental apartments and things at how much, you know, they're going to charge for rent.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're never going to get that. And then the building fills.
Mhm.
It like fills quickly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense to me, but I do hear from a lot of younger people that, you know, complaining that the cost of renting and certainly buying, that it's a burden on them. It's a real thing, you know.
I hear from a lot of younger people that it's actually, you know, while renting, it's almost impossible to transition to a buying position because you can never save enough money because, you know, God forbid you have a dog, you know, that's $500 a month for that, or you want a parking space, you know, and every little bit kind of eats away at everything, you know, assessments, things like that. So I think a lot of people, that's why they're choosing to stay at home more often and for longer periods of time or staying with family members because they can't afford to transition into that buying position.
I think that's why ADUs and everything else have gotten to be more and more popular because it's an
Yeah.
alternative for people to, you know, more flexibility.
Agreed.
Any other comments? No?
This next slide is, you know, pairs with the previous slide. The previous slide looked at costs and what households are spending per month. And this slide takes a, you know, broader view at the rental market, what rental units are available at what price points and how that matches up with renter households based on incomes in the community. The rule of thumb that we're using here is that a renter household can afford to spend 30% of their monthly income on housing. So that's how these groups are sort of paired together. Thinking that a household with an income about $50,000 can afford to spend about $1,250 per month using that 30% rule of thumb. So on this slide, we see really two, maybe three, really two mismatches. So on the left side of the screen, on the more affordable side of the rental market, there's more renter households with modest incomes than rental options affordable to them. And then on the right side of the screen, on the higher end of the market, there's also more renter households with higher incomes than you know, higher priced rental units. In some ways, this data may be lagging. It may not be capturing some of the new market rate apartments that have been added in the community recently. But still, there's likely a gap at the right side of the screen as well. So in some ways, that speaks to what the chair was just talking about, that builders see, you know, pumped up demand for those luxury apartments to meet that demand. Where at the same time, builders may also recognize the demand on the left side of the screen for the more affordable rental options, but just not be able to provide that in the current building market and construction market at the moment.
Look at this differently though on the left side versus the right. The left side is purely want affordability, the right side is you could have over 150,000 just not want to spend 30.
That's,
So I can skew this data some, so I think it's more meaningful on the left side there. Frankly, I'm shocked that there's 1,300 units available under $1,250. That's the big takeaway from the slide.
Yes.
Yeah, one where you found them. Got it.
Agreed,
Yes.
yeah.
I was going to make that point as well, that even though there are that many homes affordable at that price point, in reality, many of the people who could afford more are occupying those homes. So the gap is probably quite a bit greater as developers figure out what their next move is. So that's accurate.
And what last thing I'll say here, just sort of building off what Commissioner Barry just said, we were surprised to see the number of rental units on the left side of the screen here. Now, again, this data does have some lag to it. This is data that's pulling from 2020 through 2024, and then it averages what that number is through those years. And we're in 2026 now. There will likely be fewer rental units below $1,250 a month than what's shown on the screen. But even having said that, what's shown on the left side of the screen is in some ways unique to Downers Grove compared to a lot of other communities in DuPage County, or other communities that have a really strong homeowner market like you do not also have that really robust rental market and those older rental units that you have. So in some ways, on the next slide, we'll see the increases in those older rentals in terms of their monthly rent. And in some ways, that's a challenge. But in other ways, that's an opportunity. You have this unique feature of your community, and there's something worth looking into options to preserve those housing options in your community. So we'll stop there. Tell us what else we should know about this data. Does it surprise you? We heard one surprise. Are there other questions that this sparks?
I just say, I feel like the amount of units available in the 1,250 to 2,500, I feel like that's a little off too. Because I don't think that there's that many available, just, from what I've seen, I don't see that many available. And I do see more available, especially with that higher price point as of the last few years.
Yeah, it seems like the 2,500 to 3,500 is more in line with, if I remember correctly, like the Maple in Washington. Is it around that? Like, because there's different levels of units there.
I mean, we just talked about a development a few months back about, $4,000 a month. So, that's even over what your highest price point is here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's specific to new construction though, right? Yeah.
almost exclusively, yeah.
We tend to focus on downtown here. So there are, when you take a look at the rental units available, there are, if you do go towards Prentice or you go near Maple and 355, and some towns south on here, there are some older buildings that don't have.
Yeah. But yes, I'd be surprised to see anything at 1,250 right now.
Yeah, I agree. No other thoughts on that slide? No?
All right. Moving along, I think in total we have about maybe 7 or 8 more slides. So we're thinking we'd wrap up here around 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. I think we'll reasonably be within that time frame. We really appreciate all of the input so far. This is the last slide that we're looking at on the rental side of housing in Downers Grove. And similar to what we were talking about, all of the demand for the starter homes in Downers Grove, there's also very strong demand for what you might call a starter apartment in Downers Grove. The lower costs, maybe smaller square footage, usually older apartment buildings. And rents in these buildings have risen quickly over the past decade. And, you know, this is one trend that is in some ways unique to Downers Grove. If you look at the median rent in buildings built before 1940, in the 40s and the 50s and in the 60s and even the 70s, in each of those groups, the median rent rose by 5% per year or more over the past decade. If you look at homes, you know, apartments built in the 60s, that figure is 10% per year, which is definitely outpacing inflation. And so in, you know, a very small community that does not have many apartments, we may see this and think, oh, this has something to do with, you know, data issues. It's a small number of apartments, so we can't really trust the data and the margin of error that's provided by the Census Bureau. But, you know, due to the size of the rental market in Downers Grove, that does give more credibility to this trend. So it really sticks out to us. It's one of the unique trends like I saw, and I just want to hear from you all if there's any context that you think would be helpful for us to know here. Sometimes these can happen, these changes can happen due to, you know, a purchase of a complex or a building and rehab or renovation, and sometimes it's just due to competition. So we're curious what you're willing to share here, what you've heard.
I know it seems kind of out there maybe a little bit, but there is definitely a value to mid-century modern design and aesthetic. And, you know, most things that are built in that 60 to 69 range tend to lean that direction. And because there is a huge desire for that style of property because it translates well into modern, I feel like that's why, landlords are going to charge more for that, just as a design aesthetic. But I think also it speaks to the community. You know, people want to be here in Downers, and so they're willing to pay for that, you know, a little bit more than they would for maybe surrounding communities. So I think it's kind of a little bit of both.
I think there has been some rehabbing, especially if you ever go down there, if you have an one company, Pineapple Properties, has purchased 3 or 4 of the buildings. They're gutting them, and so they're updating the units. So prices are spiking there, and these are mostly buildings that were built probably in the 50s and 70s. There's some items there. There's a couple of them around downtown here too that I think have been rehabbed as well. So in addition to the mid-century aesthetic, I think a lot of them seem just prime for just going out with the cabinetry in it, with model floors and up the garage.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Yeah, I was curious why the jump in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And what sort of sample size? You said it's not a small town, but could there be a single development or a couple developments that could skew these results as well?
It's possible. Yeah. You know, it's something we'll definitely be looking into. And I think, you know, the purpose of this question is not to, you know, put any apartment building in a bad light, but it's just to understand what trends are actually happening, and what strategies other communities have used to soften that trend where possible. So yeah, this is helpful, and I'm sure we'll learn more from the focus group as well, you know, hearing from some of the builders and some of the other stakeholders that have been in the community involved in this area. Okay. We'll go ahead and pivot to the final portion of the conversation, which is about people who work in Downers Grove. And for this portion, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Robin, to walk us through these slides. And again, feel free to ask questions as we go. Really want you to help round out our perspective of the data.
Thank you, Ben. So if we go to the next one, I would just say, you know, as Nancy and Ben have described, this Homes for a Changing Region technical assistance program has been around for 20 years now, consistently refining its approach and learning from its past experience and endeavoring to ensure that communities like yours benefit from the lessons and successes of their peers. This whole question area, for example, is one of the newer areas of focus as we help communities think about housing demand and the connection between housing and a vibrant economy. So why is it worthwhile to pay attention to this group of over 50,000 workers commuting from outside of Downers Grove? As you know, and as you've described, Downers Grove is home to an important job hub, valuable to the local economy. The commissioners have already talked about what a draw it's been for them personally and for people they know, not just the downtown, but the housing stock near downtown. We've learned that, housing affordability and accessibility, both related to local workers and residents, have a meaningful impact on local businesses and anchor institutions, as they need to be able to both attract and retain their workforce in order for those workers to be successful, and they count on the stability and prosperity of local residents to themselves, prosper and be stable. So in terms of Chair Rickard's earlier point about the inevitable, community resistance that leaders face when proposing different densities and price points, we've seen many times how enlightened employers who understand their self-interest in this, like hospitals who are willing to say how critical it is for assistant nurses to live near the hospital in order to help, your loved ones, that message can really reframe the dialogue and the community's understanding of who you're talking about when you discuss the need for affordable housing. So, just as those with housing cost burdens are less able to shop and dine downtown, as Ben was describing before, workers who shop and dine while in Downers Grove contribute to the local economy. And you can't help but imagine how much more that would happen if some of those workers chose to live in town too. So while this impacts businesses and anchor institutions, there's also an impact for the employees. Those with longer commutes give up valuable time and dollars to transportation. And on the flip side, those who can live in Downers Grove are more likely to buy into the community and stick out their jobs over the long term. So these next two slides look very similar. And I think with this one and the next one, the questions are simple. One, whether this is sort of familiar information to you, if it sounds right, if there's more we should know, and if you see the workforce as relevant to your future housing trends. So I'll just pause there. In terms of your own future housing trends, if you think about inclusive growth as a goal and, in reviewing your comprehensive plan, that seemed to be one of the values. It's interesting to note the difference in demographics of those commuting into work in Downers Grove and those who are commuting out. And not only are the workers considerably younger and more diverse than the resident population, but this slide, it summarizes it only in terms of the workers. And it's noteworthy that, the overall resident population, I think it's, 18% of the current resident population includes people of color, which is, compared to over 38% in the workforce. So again, do these slides seem relevant to you all? Are there surprises here? Is there more we should be thinking about as we look at these trends?
Number one for me is the question that pops into my head is what types of businesses relate to these percentages?
Yes.
Because we do have several retail cores in the village, and I know we have some medical and office, and I'm just curious how that relates.
Yes. I think we begin to cover that on the next slide, not line by line, but just looking at the range of industries. So we could go there unless there are other questions. You want to go to the next one? So right, as you noted, there you have the full range of jobs and industries here, with healthcare and social assistance being the largest category. And obviously those jobs cover the full income spectrum as well, right? Just over a quarter of the jobs are in that health care and social assistance category, but All of the other industry groups are here, as you see, ranging from 2% to 8% of the total jobs available. So on one end of the income spectrum, you have accommodations and food service, that's 8% of the jobs. And on the other end, you have professional, scientific, and technical services also representing 8% of the jobs. So I think, those are probably the two extremes in terms of lower cost wages and higher cost wages. Retail, education, administration, manufacturing jobs represent about 7% each. And then, the rest are in smaller percentages: wholesale trade, construction, management, transportation, and warehousing. And so that begins to answer your question. It's harder to go line by line, but as Ben described earlier, if we go to the next slide here, in terms of housing for a stable and competitive workforce, you wonder, what does a household need in order to afford to buy a home here and to rent a home here, using that, a third of household income rule of thumb. So that's what, you need to earn $156,000 to afford a median home sales price and closer to $60,000 to rent. So this next slide, I think it's the closest thing to answering your question. We put together, we call this a stoplight chart, right? It's really purely for educational and contemplative purposes, providing more information about the people who are currently priced in and out of the housing market based on their work. So we can, depending on your feedback today, we could swap in and out the jobs and industries represented on the left-hand column. But we call this the stoplight chart because, right, if green means go and yellow means slow down or speed up, and red means stop. In this scenario, the jobs on the left and the salaries on the left, those top rows, are the ones that can neither afford to rent or own, not just in Downers Grove, but in surrounding communities, because we recognize that, most employers aren't paying as much attention to municipal boundaries. They just want people to be able to get to work within a reasonable time frame. And we have two slides showing how this differs as you move out of Downers Grove. The ones with the yellow can only afford to rent, and the ones with green can afford to own or rent. So, Colin pulled these numbers thinking about sort of the representation, the 25% or so of the jobs are in the healthcare and assistance industry. So there are three examples there. There's the overall healthcare support occupation. That's the largest number of jobs within that 25% healthcare arena. Nurses assistant are on the high end of that healthcare support occupations, grouping. And then down below you have healthcare practitioners, which are more like, doctors and registered nurses, nurses practitioners, chiropractors, the full range of caregivers out there. And so for each industry, that's categorized by the Illinois Department of Employment Security, we looked at county-wide wages and Downers Grove rental expenses and housing costs. And again, this is it's I don't know if it's an art or a science. It's really for discussion purposes. Most of these jobs are reflecting a single income household. There are a couple examples here, like a nurse's assistant and a chef down near the bottom, or an elementary school teacher and an electrician that are dual income households. But then we don't do the magic math of saying, well, those folks are might have to pay more in childcare, which which appear to be higher in DuPage County than the rest of the state. And based on averages that CMAP estimates of what transportation costs, those dual income households would probably have to pay at least $20,000 more for transportation. So if you took that out, it might rid us of some of those green opportunities. So really, it's more for discussion, I think, for all of us, and also the the anchor institution and the businesses in town to understand this issue from their perspective.
So where are these people commuting in from? Do we know that?
I feel like you're prompting us exactly the way we want to be prompted. So
Oh,
that the
sorry.
next, no. So before we
I mean,
switch, because that next slide tries to answer that question. Just quickly, any feedback on these jobs? Like, do these speak to you? Do you think these would speak to your constituents as the relevant jobs? Because we sort of pulled them based on what the general industry rates are and common jobs in those areas.
Just for the Planning and Zoning Commission's benefit, the next slide, I think, is a couple more towns that are close to us.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I meant to go one more slide, but right, this just shows you that this is a major regional trend, you know, the mismatch between where workers live and where the jobs are. And throughout the region, you were talking earlier about University Park. Their issue is not affordability, their issue is appeal, right? They also have workers coming long distances because they're not choosing to live in University Park. You have the opposite wonderful challenge that people really want to come here. And that's why there's such a, you know, the demand is so high. Any other feedback on the relevance of this slide? Or whether we should swap out any of these jobs to tell the story better? And then this last slide in the category just it tries to answer your question about where people are coming from. The purple dots in this chart represent where they're commuting from, and most work, you know, less than 10 miles away. I mean, most work less than 24 miles away, I should say, but you know, a good percentage of those work less than 10 miles away. But you know, it gets harder and harder again for those employees who have kids to, you know, to feed and get to school at home, or help them with their homework. And employers always tell us that the further people are away, the more likely those people are to take a whole day off for, you know, a 1-hour doctor's appointment that any child or the individual has. So it really does have to do with productivity at the work, retention, and recruitment as well.
Do we have any further drill down on where these people are commuting from? Are they living further west, southwest?
So I guess can you talk about the purple more than I can here in this?
Yeah.
You can.
Oh, it's hard to see. The
Yeah.
ones are where they come from.
Yes.
It looks like more north and south.
So actually,
Like, from what I can see.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to that point, the area where the most workers are commuting into Downers Grove from is southwest, Bolingbrook, Joliet area. Looks like about 12,000 people commuting from the southwest, and then it's more equally distributed north, northeast, east. Straight east is the second largest, just around 10,000.
Yeah, if you look really carefully, you could see that's where the concentration of purple are. But it's hard to see.
We're just thinking, yeah, this is pretty better.
So,
You're just commuting from more affordable areas.
yes, for more affordable areas. And, you know, obviously, not everybody wants to live near work, right? It might be the other, you know, that might be the spouse whose job is more relevant. People have the school districts they prefer, or you know, the churches or the synagogues they prefer. But I was always very tuned into this, you know, when visiting my mom at the hospital and hearing how long those nurses assistants commuted to work and how important they were to my family, you know, and how when they came to work grouchy or stressed, you know, it impacted all of us. And, you know, we feel the same way about our kindergarten teachers and nursery school teachers. So it's just part of the overall discussion about the demand for housing.
I guess out of all these recent slides, I was kind of surprised to learn that our daytime population goes up 35,000
Yeah.
head count during the day.
Yeah, it's significant. So, are the lunchtime restaurants doing better than the dinner time restaurants, perhaps, as a result of that?
People for a big market center around here now.
Yeah. I like Butterfield.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like everything up and down Butterfield is busy weekdays, and then downtown is busy weekends
Yeah.
and evenings. I mean, just a noticeable change in recent years, walked down it quite a bit and just shocked. It just always seems full.
Always. His retirees seem school midday. People far younger than me.
Hand it back to you, Ben. Sure.
Well, we have some time budgeted ourselves. Just if there's anything that you feel like was not shown in the data, any trends or issues or goals that you want to maybe close out, offer some closing remarks on, or if there's anything that you just really want to emphasize that you have questions about that you'd like to be explored in the expert panel, we're happy to receive some of that feedback here as we close out this meeting.
And we've been taking notes. A lot of good questions have suggested more follow-up for us to do. So we'll do that follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen in here, I think it looks to be pretty accurate from what I hear, hear and see of people there. There's an affordability gap, a desire to come here, but, people either can't afford it or there's not product available for them to buy, even if they could afford it, because things do move fast. And it seems like there's two types of housing that come up these days. It's either the larger scale rental units in the downtown or single family homes. And I don't see, staff would know, but just from my parts of town that I go through and from what I see here, single family residential and then the larger density stuff. And there seems to be a big gap in the middle of other options for people that might like, maybe they don't want to share hallways and entrances with people, but they don't mind being attached in a denser environment, like townhomes, like Georgian Courts over here seems to be, really popular. You have some sense of kind of or privacy, whereas you're not sharing entrances and hallways with people. And feel like there's also a need too in the, people that do like living in, the larger lots, single family homes, that they could benefit and maybe solve some of the problems by having the flexibility for, if the locations were right, for things like ADUs to give people flexibility to adult children to come back, elderly parents, and then the ability to cycle generations through those different aspects of a single family lot where, when you buy one of these, it's like your family can stay there for a long period of time, because the people who buy the main house, when they get older, kids could move in and kind of take over the house, and the parents could move out, or it could be adult kids coming back, whatever the need is at the time. It just gives people flexibility to stay there longer in a more affordable environment with those options.
Yep.
I'm kind of guessing that at the end, it's like I said, from parts that I see, it seems like there's some missing gaps of housing types.
I personally have seen the biggest desire being ranch homes, 1,500 to 2,500 square feet, with exactly like you said, options to have that accessory dwelling where it could be a generational thing. A ranch house meaning, you know, you can stay in that when you're older and you maybe have some mobility issues, but you can also pass it down to your kids. I happen to live in an area of Downers that has houses around that size, and I would say at least 4 or 5 houses on my street in the last 15 years have transitioned to family members and then have been rehabbed and then, you know, re-inhabited by the same family. So I feel like that's definitely something that people are really desiring, but there just is not a lot of that available, unfortunately.
And my big takeaway from it is a lot of this is regional trends or national trends, so we're not unique in this problem. I just think we have to think about what are we willing to sacrifice or to change in order to fix this, and how important it is for us to do that. Because the other side to this is like we still want property values to go up. We still want to be a desirable location and what's that. I don't know. I think it's a balance of what we want to give, have more affordable housing, if that's what we want to do. And I mean, I feel like the whole nation's dealing with this.
Yes.
So what can we do here locally to just support our community, the people who are here already, just stay or not stay or move or not move? I think that's kind of what we have to focus on. Because that's probably everything and anything we can within the power, within its scope.
Right. I think, from my perspective, I think this community survey is going to be so important, so critical into what feeds into the final recommendation. And of course, the expert panel. But, you know, for this group to be an advisory committee, at least for me, would it be inappropriate to see what other towns have done? Or could I personally read a final report out from a different community? And not saying that Downers Grove is going to be exactly the same as, you know, a neighbor, but, you know, I think that's going to help frame this into the context that will allow me to be, you know, effective in my role here today. And it may seem like we're working, you know, forwards to back, but sometimes that just helps me. I don't know if anybody else.
But yeah, I got curious about that too. And I went to the website and there were about 60 reports up there from all different communities over the years, because my very first question when I heard about this committee, I'm like, okay, what does this committee do? And what are some typical outcomes that, you know, just wanted to see the process and I thumbed through some of them, but they're all out there.
And I read the original report, and the first thing that I wanted to know was all these projections for all these communities. How do they compare to what we actually did or, you know, grew?
And to talk about that.
I think, you know, when you talk to the community, that's important to show, like, this is what we thought was going to happen. This is what happened. Now we have this problem. Here's this gap. Here are similar communities, you know, like, and maybe it's not going to be the same community. It's not going to be Hinsdale for this, all of it, but it might be Bolingbrook and Hinsdale, or, you know, Naperville, or, you know, just as examples of, you know, the same types of problems we're having. But I do think that we have a large enough gap that, you know, that we all know is there, that there's room to play with it. There's room to do something without affecting property values, you know, throughout the village and chasing away, you know, everybody who's, you know, under 30.
Right.
I think the community involvement and the community survey is going to be hypercritical here. Because I did read through a lot of reports, I've read through a lot of recommendations, and anytime you get to any suggestion that might suggest, setting aside affordable housing or increasing density in certain neighborhoods, you're gonna draw some passionate responses. And so the community has to feel heard, but echoing what you just said, if there are success stories
Yes,
and best
yes,
practices from other peer communities, similar demographics in Elmhurst, Naperville, something Glen Ellen, something that you can share that this worked, it decreased property values to quell some of those fears, whether valid or not, is what we're going to hear about. So the amount of more information we can share with people, I think.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts that I'm having are around, so we saw here tonight, that there's people who already live in Downers Grove who could use help on their affordability, right? And so how do we meet their needs? That shouldn't necessarily change our property values, but rather make it better for those who already live here. I'm craving more, I'm a consultant too, so I'm craving more like recent projections of who's moved here. And we looked at a lot of census data this evening, which is a little dated, but in the survey, I'm curious, right? Who's moved here recently and have their needs been met, or did they settle? Like, what gaps do we have for those recent ones, so that we can think about several years out what we might need. I'll also offer, you know, if we've got a quarter of healthcare workers in our community or working in our community, we've seen, I've only been here for 4 months, but we've seen cases about increasing that in Downers Grove as well. So what are their needs and how should we prepare for that?
Yeah, increasing the services,
Yes.
hospitals and
Yes.
medical, yeah.
Right.
Good questions.
Anybody else have anything? No?
Yeah, wonderful questions. I think several of the questions were answered by other commissioners in terms of how to find the reports, just mayorscaucus.org. I will say for the Commissioner Barry's question of best practices, the Mayor's Caucus this past year helped update a repository of best practices with work from Robin and Colin and lots of interviews. We interviewed over 70 municipalities. And that resource is called Homegrown, like homegrown housing solutions. So if you go to mayorscaucus.org/homegrown, you can sort of click through that library of best practices. So if you're looking for lots of reading material, it's there. Those are, usually just a page each. Those are hopefully pretty digestible. And they're across lots of different geographies, counties, plenty in DuPage as well. To the question of how did projections from 2007 compare to reality since then, I think I might turn over to Nancy to answer that question because she was personally involved in a lot of those. But we did interview those municipalities as well. Past years, we interviewed 41 of the 65, 70. There's some communities that have wanted a lot more housing construction that didn't see it for certain reasons. But there's some communities that have built out what they thought they would see their demand be in 30 years, and they've reached that threshold already because, the housing market has changed since then. So maybe to...
Pretty well.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. I don't want to belabor it, but, it depends community to community. And, you've got other people involved in just the community. You've got developers, and there's some communities that have actually shared their recommendations with developers. Because, we're interested to show interest in that. So there's different ways they have all gone about it as well to get the results that they would hope to get, so.
So I just want to extend our gratitude for you being generous with your time, for giving us a starting roadmap of what some of the goals and issues are, as well as what are some of the pitfalls that we should be sure that strategies avoid looking forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go to the public.
Yeah, that would be appropriate at this point. I know we got John here and then maybe a future city planner sitting here too, if they want to offer any input.
Yeah. You have any questions or anything you'd like to say?
Just a comment, Commissioner. John Ladon, 1930, 55th Place, 41-year resident of Downers Grove, and incredible work And I think it's going to be valuable information for this board and for the village council as well. I was pleased to see the demolition numbers, and I think it'd be no surprise to you, but 15, 20 years ago, if a house sold for 250, 300,000, you knew it was coming down. And I think as we've gotten closer to the current, my wife and I track the real estate almost daily, just looking at what's selling. And there's a house on Prince Pond that went for $540,000 and they took it down. So I think when you look at 2010, it was probably in the 300,000 range. But as we get more towards the current, we see houses going for 400 and over 400 and now even 500 where they're taking it down. So if a builder's buying that lot, he's in for $500,000 before he even breaks ground, which is contributing to the $1 million plus homes we see in town. So just wanted to make that point. Thank you and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Leo, do you have anything you'd like to, any questions about what's going on? No? Anything else from staff?
No, just thank you for the presentation. As Ben indicated, we'll move forward with the survey. Scheduling the focus group interviews is what's coming next. And then we will see you all again June 22nd for the expert panel meeting.
And before June 22nd,
Oh, yes.
we'll see you next Monday. Planning and zoning for our regular scheduled meeting on there too. And then I will send a reminder as we're getting into the summer. I know it's a lot of dates to keep track of. So I'll just do my typical, just make sure you have these dates on your calendar, make sure we have forums for these meetings. We do have a pretty action-packed summer ahead of us. And again, you know, we try to coordinate these so we don't overload the agendas for you folks and us over there too. And just wanted to state thank you to our group for coming out tonight and getting the input to move this further. And Flora is doing a lot of work on this already, and there's still a lot more to do. So we appreciate her efforts too, working with our team.
Thank you.
And make sure you tell all your friends and neighbors to fill out the surveys. It'll be about one to spread the word.
I think it's going to be starting next week. It'll hit e-news and then obviously the Inside DG that we talked about. But we know, I'm sure there'll be announcements at different meetings we have too over there too. So
Is there a budget for like direct mail, like, or?
it's going to be an article on Inside DG that it's going to be featured in there. So we're going to just piggyback onto that. Timing's perfect. I like to say we planned it that way, but that's just the way it happened. And so it's going to go on that newsletter that goes to every household we have in the community.
Yeah, but not everybody in those households actually looks at it. In mine, I'm the one that looks
Yeah.
at it.
There's other mailers that are certainly sent out that people don't look at either, but we can just hope for the best on this one. And we'll
But
really
I know
keep
you
it up.
guys did such a great job of, for the comprehensive plan, having all these different ways of
Right.
communicating the information, and then to have people say that they never heard of it. And I remember that from a couple of meetings ago, people saying they had no idea. I'm like,
Yeah, to clarify,
Yeah. I don't know.
You go above and beyond to notify the people, then I see something on social media. I didn't know any of this was going on. Nobody ever told me.
yeah, so what are we missing?
Not heard to these people.
Are they just living under a rock? I don't know.
Yeah, you can't avoid knowing I mean, it's all over the place. I too, I'm shocked when people complain about, I had no idea what was going on. Well, then you must be living under a rock because everywhere I go, I see something about it.
Sign in front of it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it from, nothing else from staff?
Yeah, that would be it for right now. So
Okay,
we'll
now
see
we
you
have
all next
public
Monday.
comment and, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Eberhardt, second by
I second.
Mr. Barry. All in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.